The entire plan really has been beset by concerns and delays from the beginning. We had anger from one of the local MPs nearby, Chris Loder, who was concerned about the fact that the 500 people are due to be accommodated on there when it was initially designed for 200. Then we had the Fire Brigades Union describing it as a potential death trap. The government throughout have insisted that all fire safety and health and safety checks have been carried out as they should have been done. And early this week we heard from Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick saying just that.
The apparent refusal of some people to accept perfectly decent accommodation on this barge. You've got to remember that this is a form of accommodation that's being used in Belgium, in the Netherlands, has been used by British oil and gas workers. And so, you know, if it's good enough for them, it should be good enough for the migrants as well. We'll always house people in decent, legally compliant accommodation. I genuinely believe that the UK has the most comprehensive plan of any European country to tackle this issue.
Now, the political context of this, of course, is that the government have made stopping the small boats a big policy pledge to the British people, one of their top 5 priorities. This accommodating people on board barges like this one is meant to be a kind of deterrent effect rather than putting people up in hotels. Currently 50,000 people living in hotels at a cost of £6 million or so a day to the taxpayer while they await their asylum decisions to be made by the Home Office, because of course there is a very long backlog. Labour, of course, insists that's the real problem, that if they got into power they would speed up those decisions and clear the backlog. The government insists this Bibi Stockholm, along with their other plans to try and set up accommodation in disused military bases and army camps and so on, trying to get value for money for the taxpayer. They say vessels like the Bibi Stockholm have been used by other European countries, and that this is an appropriate approach to deal with the problem. But clearly, days like today, many more questions being asked about the suitability of vessels like this as accommodation.
Amanda, thanks so much for that. Well, let's discuss this further. We're joined now by the Senior Clinical Lecturer at the University of Exeter, Dr. Bharat Pankania. Thanks so much for joining us on this topic. Just first of all, remind us what Legionnaire's disease is.
So legionella is the bacteria, and the one that we are concerned for humans is Legionella pneumophila serogroup 1. That's the commonest one. So if you have found Legionella bacteria in the water on that barge, then there is a balance of probability that you will also find Legionella pneumophila serogroup 1. And it is spread by the aerosol route, i.e. through the showers mostly. And then, of course, it affects more people who are in the older age group, smokers, older men especially, and people who are immune suppressed.
So finding the bacteria is one thing, obviously then that leading to the disease is another. How common is it for the bacteria to be present? Is it in fact something that's perhaps more common than necessarily the headline might suggest?
Well, they should not be present in a place like that. And when Robert Jenrick says that we house oil workers on similar barges, he is definitely not comparing like with like, because when you accommodate oil workers, I don't know how many there are, but there wouldn't be 500. And when you have a large number of people accommodated, you need better plumbing system so that the water temperature is maintained at a right temperature throughout the circulatory system so that you don't get the growth of Legionella bacteria in the waterworks, which will then come out of the shower heads, which can then be inhaled, which can then cause you Legionella pneumonia illness.
So we also understand, based on reporting from my colleagues, that they had done health checks in July. The results hadn't come back yet before migrants started boarding the boat. When the results did come back containing initial indications of Legionella on Monday, the 7th of August, they then started to carry out further checks and have only obviously removed the migrants as of today. What's your take on that?
Well, as I said a few seconds ago, if you have found legionella in the waterworks, there is a balance of probability that you will also find legionella pneumophilia serogroup 1, which is the common one that causes infections in humans. So having found legionella in the waterworks, my expert advice, if I were the consultant communicable disease control for that place, would be to say, stop now. I need to ascertain if this place, the water system, is safe for domestic use, meaning people living there. I cannot allow people to go there until I am reassured the legionella situation is safe. So if I find it, my answer is stop. I need to ascertain first before I allow people on board.
Were the migrants on board then once the legionella was located on Monday, 7th of August, if our reporting is correct on that point, and the following 4 days, were they put at risk?
Well, it depends, because my understanding, again, is, of course, there is a risk, but I don't know. Nobody knows. But the risk groups are, and I don't think the migrants are in that risk group, but I don't know, which is the older age group, men who smoke, people who are immune suppressed. That category of people are at more risk, greater risk than younger people. But that is not to say that younger people are at zero risk, if you get my drift.
I totally do. And just as we wrap things up, do remind us the disease that can come from this. It's, as you're saying, obviously more severe for those in older risk categories and the like. But what is the disease itself?
So the disease is a pneumonia. It's a pneumonia. It's a chest infection, a lung infection caused by this legionella bacteria, and it can be quite severe. However, we have got very good antibiotics that work against these bacteria. And once we know that we're dealing with a legionella infection, that becomes very easy. The thing is, we often don't know when a person presents with, I have a chest infection, I don't feel well, I am short of breath. The thing to do under those circumstances, so if anyone from those barges presented with the signs and symptoms of a pneumonia, the first thing you would think of is, could this be legionella? Let me get a sputum sample from them. Let me perhaps empirically, meaning blind, treat them as if it was a legionella infection with the correct antibiotics.
Dr. Pankania, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you.